Welcome to the Assembling Inclusion podcast. On this show, we feature different programs, individuals, and initiatives focused on being more inclusive of individual needs. We invite you to learn right alongside us. If you want some additional resources or access to our courses, please visit our website or follow us on social media. But for right now, let's get right to the episode. Coming up next on the Assembling Inclusion podcast.
I like to think that we're giving people the opportunity to just have no barriers when it comes to technology. And that's where I really think we've made a difference, is that you can now, access a website that you couldn't do before. You can now comfortably try to write that book that you didn't have the confidence to do before. And we're doing it in a nice, safe environment as well. And
today on the show, I interview Robert James Gabriel, the founder and CEO of Helperbird. You're going to learn a little bit about his backstory and the evolution of the Helperbird extension in the interview today, including many accessibility features that are built into the platform. One of the things I really loved about Helperbird is not only how easy it is to use, especially from a special educator perspective, but just how closely this company listens to the suggestions and recommendations from its users. We talk about the different features and how they could be used in classrooms, schools, or workplaces. So let's dive right in. Hello, and welcome to the Assembling Inclusion podcast. I'm here with Robert James Gabriel, the founder and CEO of Helperbird, an all-in-one inclusive extension that provides personalized support and makes pages and documents more accessible. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
I actually came across Helperbird. It's kind of a funny story. I was still in the classroom and I had heard about it. I was teaching in the resource room and I thought that some of the tools were just perfect for what my students needed to learn to read and write and kind of blend into the general ed classroom and get the supports they needed. So I actually added it to a list of tools I wanted to try out, but then I left the classroom and I found you again through the Google Trainer group. There was a post about Helperbird and I was like, oh my goodness, now I have to make sure that I add you to my list to talk to on my podcast. So I'm just really excited that you're here.
No, I'm so excited. We've had a great history from the launch in 2015. So it's, people have probably seen us before, but we're like a totally new person in the year 2022. And it's just excited to talk about it.
So I want to talk a little bit later about how it's transitioned over time. There's been a lot of changes, but just to start off, can you explain the gist of the extension for our listeners?
Yeah, of course. Do you want me to go into the history first, or just what the actual extension does?
Combination of both, whichever one you want to start with. Both are interesting.
Yeah, I'll give the shortened down history. So if people aren't aware, my name is Robert James Gabriel and I have dyslexia. I wasn't diagnosed until I was about 16 years old, 15, 16. And I was struggling through school. I had issues. My handwriting was atrocious. I really needed help. It was just I hadn't been diagnosed. A teacher at my parent-teacher meeting told my parents I should consider dropping out because I was struggling too much and that maybe a trade would be more acceptable and I'd try more. Anyway, my parents turned into bears, as I would describe it, and they would protect their cub and they pressurized the school to go find funding. But they said because I was kind of heading towards the end of high school here in Ireland, that they would rather spend the money on a younger person. And I get that. Schools don't have huge budgets, but they pressurized a bit more and it got me diagnosed and I had dyslexia. And I got the help I needed. My grades improved, my state exams improved. At the same time, I discovered computers. And I entered a programming competition, which I just kind of got into, and I won the school about $10,000 and was able to give it back to the resource lab, meaning more kids got tested. And that point always stuck with me in life. And that I realized that if I hadn't got the help or the ed tech tools that I needed, I don't know where I would have been. So we jump forward. I go through college. I was doing an internship and they told me I could build whatever I wanted. And this is 2015. And I got to build the very first version of Helperbird, which changed the page to have the open dyslexic font. And fast forward 3 more years, I got a little bit burnt out, decided to take a sabbatical and decided to focus on Helperbird full time. So to answer your question now, what Helperbird does and its mission is the ability to give every type of learner the tools they might need to unlock their full potential. And what does that actually mean? Some users love voice typing, but want the font to be in red. You can do that. If you want it to have word prediction in any language, you can do that with the background being green. You can mix and match over 42 different features to kind of personalize the web to your own needs and give everyone their full potential and make it an equal playing field. And there's text to speech with natural voices. Some people love them, some people hate them, but the option is there because there's no one solution for any difficulty. We try to give you the options to find the combination that works for yourself. And it works on every page under the sun as long as it's in the browser.
I love the concept of you understand that not everybody wants the exact same thing. And that was something I think I always struggled with my students, was that they were given a certain tool and they didn't like the voice typing on it, or they didn't like the way the text to speech sounded. So I really like that you're making sure that the product allows for people to mix and match based on what their own preferences are. That's something that's really, I think, important.
Yeah, and one thing I might just add is that when I used EdTech, and there's some fantastic tools out there, is that we spent a lot of time in design to make it kind of pretty to use so that people who might necessarily have learning difficulties would also be attracted to use it, so that there isn't like, oh, you're using technology, you're standing out. We kind of wanted to blend in with people, and that's our kind of overall goal as well.
That really makes it more inclusive. So you could use it in a class of different abilities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you perfect wording.
So let's talk a little bit about, in 2015, you said you launched and you had just turning the websites into open dyslexic font. And obviously now there are, just going on your website, there are so many features of the extension. So how has it changed over time, I guess, other than adding all the new features to the extension?
Yeah, so initially it was just about changing the font, and it was like that for about 6 months. And then I was blown away when I got my first message saying, hey, could you add color changing? Just by a total random person, and I was able to add it. And then over that, I kind of got the philosophy of, I hated when software wasn't updating regularly or letting me know. So I put in the company handbook that every 2 weeks we do updates, and we take every piece of feedback in through the live messages, Twitter, so every support ticket. I make sure the staff reads it all, and that we decide what we're going to work on. So it kind of started off gradually. We focused on reading ability, and then we focused on writing. We're moving into kind of more customization, and we're working on like Matt's abilities now over the next 6 months, and that's where our next 6 months are. But we've slowly added features every 2 weeks for the past 4 or 5 years now, and this is how these features get rolled out pretty quickly.
Oh, now it makes sense why there's so many if you're looking at feedback and improving every 2 weeks or so. Wow, that's really impressive.
We found trust as well, and that's what we try to do. We try to be more in the community more, and I just love even meeting yourself as well.
I'm sure as people are using it, there's definitely things that they would like to see. So it's great that you're taking that into consideration when you're designing. I wish more platforms working with accessibility would do that. I mean, I know some try to, but I think that's really wonderful.
Yeah, and as we say, we're not perfect. There's areas that we can improve on, but we're getting there.
Well, listening is always, listening and taking feedback from people is always, I think that's always great. So I know there's a lot of features out there, and I want to get into some of the features more in depth and how they would work and how somebody would use them. So I want to start off with someone who might have dyslexia and needs support with reading. So what are some of the best features that you think would work within Helperbird for them?
I'll just go by the most popular ones. We, of course, have the font changer, which has support for over 18 different fonts. Some of the more popular ones are the Lexint family of fonts. They're designed specifically for like dyslexia or reading difficulties, Lexint Deca being the most popular. We also, of course, have Open Dyslexic, which is very popular, and you can change those to any document to have those PDFs, web pages. We also have our text to speech, so you can highlight the text, any images, everything, and it'll read it out to you in a natural voice, and including other languages. And of course, we have the famous immersive reader built in as well. So you can have access to the amazing immersive reader on any piece of text, images, anything on the web. And then we have a few other ones. We have speed reading tools, which are fantastic. There are kind of experimental features using granule effects to help you read more, bolding certain letters. So you have access to those. And then I think the other very popular one that's growing is by far kind of our reader mode, which helps with distractions. And then you have all our tools to make it even better on top of it. And there's many different versions of reader mode. This is just our implementation of it.
I love the reader mode part of it. I mean, all of that is wonderful. I latch onto the reader mode because I always thought about like my students, I would let them have free reign of what they wanted to read about in language arts. But then you didn't know what website they were going on. And there's just so many distractions on there. So I love that on top of everything else that they have to support them in reading, it also eliminates the distractions. And that's really important.
Yeah, the other thing actually for just speaking of dyslexia too is I use it quite regularly is our picture dictionary. You can select a word and it'll show a picture right under it of what that word is. It's very handy at times.
Oh, that's really great. I made a list of all the features that I wanted to ask about and I didn't even see that. I must have missed it. So you just like click on the word right within the document or the website?
Yeah, and it will pop it up. It covers just English at the moment, but we're working on support for other languages as well. And in terms of other languages, it's mostly Spanish, German, and French.
The screen reader will also read images, you said too, in addition to regular documents?
Yeah, of course. And we have, I forgot it, our OCR, or optimal character recognition, basically extracting text from images. And that will also read it out to you as well. So that's a very popular feature across the board.
That's really great because then a teacher can assign pretty much any type of file they're assigning to the entire class and it's immediately accessible to everyone.
If it's in like a PDF for an exam, for example, they could just select the image in the PDF and it'll extract it and read it out to them.
Oh, I really like that. And you could just do that seamlessly in a class and it's just, pop in your headphones, listen, and it's all at your fingertips and you can do whatever you need to make it accessible. I really like that. As someone who used to have to run around to read things to students, I always wanted them to have more of a text to speech or something like that. So they could just have the autonomy to do it themselves at their own pace, what works for them.
Exactly. And as I said, like with so many features, they're just, it's a matter of mix and match and find what works for you.
And I'm assuming that, and now I'm getting a little off topic with the features, but so
no, of course.
I'm assuming it kind of saves the profile that they want, right? So if there's certain things they select, it will save as they move across pages and different documents.
Yeah, of course. And if you get a little tired of Helperbird, you can pause it at any time and all your settings will be saved. And then once you unpause it, will reactivate. And it actually syncs across browsers as well. So for example, if you're in school, with your school email, and then you go home and you sign back in, all your settings will be brought over with you, including your notes and all your preset settings.
Oh, that's really good. In the United States, a lot of schools now are one-to-one, but they're taking it home. But some of the younger grades, they're not taking their device home, but they still have homework and things like that. So if they're logging in, they can still access that resource in whatever setting they're in. That's really important. So that's nice to have that consistency.
Yeah, we take privacy like super seriously. One, because of all the laws, but two, we don't actually need any of the data. At the end of the day, we're an accessibility company, not a marketing company. We have no database. All this is done. So all the voice to text, all the word prediction, all that is done offline. So there's no remote database, nothing like that. And all your data stays on your browser. No extra servers or anything.
Oh, that's really good. Because I know that's a big concern for a lot of schools. It's like, where is that information going? So that's really reassuring, I'm sure, to know that it's not being stored anywhere or anything. That's
just locally on your machine, and your IT admin or whoever's in charge could wipe it, and that's it. Everything's gone. So you have complete control.
I'm going to get back to the features for a second. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the visual supports. We talked about some of the reading supports. What about the visual supports, aside from the eliminating the distractions for reading when you're in reader mode? What other kind of visual supports and features are there within the platform?
These are just a few at the top of my head. We have, of course, overlays for people with visual difficulties. We have our color blindness features. We're working on more with professional, people who are more qualified than us to get their expertise. But for example, we add special colors underneath each link to make it stand out more in contrast. We also have different contrast features to change it to yellow and black, high contrast, low contrast. We also have an alt tooltip. What does that actually mean? It means that if you hover or select an image, the description tag will appear underneath so that you could actually read what the image is. And of course, you could use our text to speech to read it out for you. as well, just make it a bit easier. You could also remove flashing images if you're epileptic, and you could also remove images across the board as well. We do have a variation of different like tinting options as well. You can choose the brightness, the colors, and things like that.
That's really helpful. I like the eliminating images too, just because again, web browsing, there's so many things that you don't need and aren't relevant. So it's nice to be able to just click away.
Yeah. And one thing that came up only 2 days ago, I had a teacher in contact with me and who mentioned how they were using the overlay feature and putting into like a dark color for a student who had a concussion. And I never once thought of that. And I was like, this, of course, it would be so useful for that situation.
I had so many students who would have concussions and we'd be doing everything virtually and all of a sudden they couldn't use their device. So those overlays, they make it so much better, especially as they're transitioning back to using the computer. If it was a particularly difficult concussion, I could see how those overlays would be really awesome for those students.
Of course. And it would just open up like a whole world of possibilities that we could work on for people.
So if a student I was a language arts special education teacher, so I'm always talking about writing and reading. So if a student is doing writing or researching, I noticed there were some features that related to that within Helperbird. Can you talk about those a little bit?
We know Google Docs and Microsoft Word and even Pages are like the go-tos, and we know we'll never be a replacement for those, especially in academia or in school. So what we try to do is build tools to focus around those. And in terms of writing and research, we offer like sticky notes or post-it notes that you can write on it, and they'll stay there. And you can add thousands, if you wish, onto the one page with different notes and comments, and they'll save and sync across your device. You can change the colors of them to make them stand out a bit more. So like say green for reference points, red for like more important. And they're all saved into like an area, what we call your notebook. And you can see the date and the color and the website that they were associated with. And then we have a highlighter, and you can highlight different parts of text and images with different colors, so you can like come back to them pretty quickly. And then we have an editor, which is a very like a clean, light version of Google Docs, and you can import your notes directly into there. And it will do Harvard referencing and different types of referencing styles. We know we won't be Google Docs. You can export all these to Google Docs, Microsoft Word, and all your other major platforms. And we do it as a light way to research and like get notes done quickly on the web. And then one other thing is we have a reading list, kind of like a more modern bookmarking. So if you wish to come back to something later on, you can read it and see how much of it you've read, and things like that. Try to make it a bit easier to do your research across the web.
I love the sticky notes. That was always something that was a big challenge, was the back and forth of like, I'm reading it and now I have to go take notes on it. And I have to go to a whole nother document or something to take care of those notes. And now you don't have to. And that's streamlines the process a little bit.
Yeah, no, exactly. And there's areas that we're experimenting with, but at the moment there are major features for kind of research purposes. And of course, we have our dictionary, which you can like select any English word and have the definition, anagrams, related words, and kind of everything brought in, and you can see what they mean.
Oh, that's good too for reading, especially for research, because I'm sure you're gonna come across words that aren't, so you don't have to like disrupt your flow of the reading. You can just have access to that resource right there within the page. So you talked a little bit about some of the popular features when we were talking about dyslexia and what would be helpful to students when they're reading. Overall, what do you think, out of all the different features that you have, what do you think are the most commonly used? From
getting like just feedback, I would say it's the font, the text to speech is probably number one, especially with our voice options. I sound like a salesman here. But I hope I don't come across like that. But there's 32 different voices. And the other thing too is that if you have any voices installed locally, you'll have access to them as well. So if you want any specific ones we don't have, so it's text to speech, the reader mode, immersive reader, and the OCR are probably our major universally used ones. And then people who have like learning difficulties in terms of dyslexia, it's normally the Open Dyslexic font or the Lex and Deca font with the dyslexia ruler. Then in general, across the board, it's becoming interesting because people who are in like web development are using Helperbird to like help develop their pages and using the features to make sure it's more universally accessible across the page. And they're using a combination of our features as well. So they're like building it into their actual platform so that those accessibility features are available to them? Not necessarily, but they're like making sure that when they change the font or use a screen reader that their site doesn't look awful or break and is more accessible.
So it's more like they're testing with it. They're making
Yes.
sure that everything is appropriate. I didn't even think about that as an option, but I could see how if you're building something out, you want to make sure it's accessible for everyone. So that's nice to have that instant resource to be able to make sure that the design is appropriate regardless of what you change it into.
And normally when we find out, we give feedback as well for like color contrasting and stuff, try to make the web a bit more accessible for all.
It provides some good insight into what people need to consider when they're doing some web design then.
Of course.
So on your website, there are some partners listed. And I noticed a few of them were school districts, I think. There were school districts listed. So how have districts adopted the Helperbird platform?
As our name has become more recognizable, we've had more interest. So at the start, it was normally like, say, they might install it for one school in a district. And then the next year, we get 6 more in that district. And it's kind of like 50-50 now. I don't want to give it the exact number, but in high numbers, installing it right across, ranging from 40,000 students to 50,000 students across whole districts and teachers as well.
So they're putting it on everyone's device. We always had to do it single for students with IEPs, but I like that they're just doing it for everyone. So everyone has access to the same resources.
Yeah, and I'm actually writing a blog post on it because we've had businesses as well that do that approach, and they call it like just the mass approach where they give it to everyone. There's no like embarrassment or shame asking for it then. It's just across the board. If it's there, it's there. And I would encourage that too.
I think that's something that I wish more schools would do, because a lot of those features can benefit a lot of different people. You don't necessarily have to even have a diagnosed or classified disability. You could still benefit from those resources. So I like that approach of just, it's almost like universal accessibility. Everyone has access.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of our main goal as a company, is because we were specifically kind of just dyslexia initially, but we've moved across into more universal kind of tooling.
I know you look every 2 weeks and look to make expansions. And you talked a little bit about some of the things that are coming up in the future, but what are some of the big plans that you have to expand Helperbird as time goes on?
From a product perspective, we launched our iOS app about 2 months ago. The numbers are ranging about 25,000 people using it already, which is way above our kind of initial target. And so all the same features are there. From a product perspective, we're focusing mostly on maths and science support, so that if you have maths questions or problems, we'll be able to read the maths problem and potentially give you the solution if you wish, and teach you how to solve the maths problem. Not just give you the answer, but like step by step of how to do it. And with general, adding more tools, more tweaks, and getting stuff across the board. And then what we feel from kind of August on is we're going to get very involved with the community, with podcasts, doing giveaways, kind of helping other websites to be more accessible, and just trying to be part of a community to make and push the web more forward. Be that from a teacher perspective, be that from a community perspective. We've been reaching out to everyone to see how we can be involved, be it from tech support to giving away subscriptions, anywhere we can. We're trying to be the friendly neighbor.
It's always great to have a nice partnership with the people and get some feedback that way too. I know you're reading the feedback and everything, but kind of building that relationship. I gasped when I heard the math. I was like, oh, that is awesome, because that is such a struggle. I taught a year of physics. I co-taught it, and getting the balancing equations to read out loud correctly was frustrating. And the math for physics, it was hard. And the kids who got so used to text to speech got frustrated because they're like, now I have to rely on you again to read it to me. So I love that you're working on math and science-based work. I think that's something that is necessary.
This is like a sneak peek. And once we have it working, it just needs a lot of fine tuning, is that once we have that down, the technology could also be used elsewhere for like improving handwriting, like from images and things like that. So it's an area that we're very interested in.
Well, that's really exciting. So just overall, how do you feel that your product has helped or is helping to make society more inclusive?
That's a fantastic question. And I've been asked it once before, and I was very blessed actually to be part of Forbes list a couple of years ago, and they were asked the same question. The major thing for me is, I mentioned at the start, is that when I had that moment in my life where the teacher told me to drop out, if I didn't have the support needed, I don't know where I would be. And I truly mean that. And I get emails almost every day from parents and from students, and just saying, thank you so much. I was able to get a B in my history test. I was able to write a letter to my grandma. And it's just, I like to think that we're giving people the opportunity to just have no barriers when it comes to technology. And that's where I really think we've made a difference, is that you can now, access a website that you couldn't do before. You can now comfortably try to write that book that you didn't have the confidence to do before. And we're doing it in a nice, safe environment as well. And I like to think we'll be part of the next great novel.
I could see that happening. Those are really wonderful success stories. I love what you said about eliminating the barriers. We're really giving so much empowerment to so many people through this product and giving them the opportunity to do things that they may not have had the tools to do before.
The one thing I might also add, if that's all right, is that I like to think that it's, especially now in the last 2 years, people are in workplaces and schools are becoming more accessibility minded. And that even this podcast alone is going to get more people talking about accessibility and trying to make sure that they're more inviting for others, be it friends, colleagues, employees, employers. And that's my personal mission too, is just try to make the world more accepting for people with different difficulties.
That's a noble mission. That's a mission I have too. So we can connect in that way. That's why we're here. So I want to thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to make sure everything is linked in the show notes so that everyone out there can take a look at Helperbird, because I just think there are so many great features that they can benefit from. But thank you so much for taking the time today.
No, of course. For anyone who's listening, I haven't talked to you about this before, but hopefully it's all right, is we have 200 copies to give away for free. So if you use the code Helperbird Coco, so Helperbird and then COCO at checkout, it'll be 100% off for the first 200, whoever does it. So yeah, it's just a small thank you for everyone.
Oh, that is so nice. Well, I hope that everyone takes advantage of that, because that is amazing. And I will make sure to promote that as well.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Assembling Inclusion podcast. I hope the information in this episode taught you something new, gave you a new idea, or showcased a new perspective. If you liked the episode, feel free to leave us a review or comment. If you have a recommendation for an individual or an organization who would make a great guest, you can message us on Twitter or Instagram, or send us an email at assemblinginclusion@gmail.com. See you next time.